It's all quiet in the underground bunker. Doors closed, locks bolted. But the Great One isn't just resting on his laurels. He's making sure your weekend is even better by giving you his best. This is the best of Mark Levin.
You may have heard of it. I wrote a book called The Democrat Party Hates America. I have to say, it predicted a whole lot of what's taking place today. I came across an article in the New York Post over the weekend that was so horrendous. I, by use of text and email, must have sent it to 120 people in radio and TV and elsewhere, even on the Hill. And each one of them was appalled. And I told them, please use it. Please spread the word. You know, I'm the cleanup hitter here on Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays and Friday, and I have my 2 Fox shows, but still, during the week, cleanup hitter's number 4. And it's an article that explains what we've been talking about now for years. I've been in this business now a long, long time. Although it doesn't seem that way. And I've known about Joe Biden a long time. I've known about our immigration issues a long time. You and I together have prevented a lot of bad immigration legislation from being passed, including under George W. Bush. But what's happening now is not about passing legislation. What's happening now is about the tyrannical acts of Joe Biden. The vast majority of what's being done to our country has no statutory or constitutional basis, quite the contrary. He uses executive orders, he uses regulations, he uses memos, he uses directives and fiats of various kinds, and he's destroying our country. He's destroying our country. And I view him as sitting in the Oval Office with his staff and his campaign people, perhaps on the speakerphone, all of them looking for ways in every department, in every agency, in every corner of the federal government, looking for ways to win this election, to use the budget and your tax dollars to win this election, to use policies to win this election by hook or by crook. And I've told you, even last week before this article in the New York Post, which I'm going to get to, I told you that this man is doing what he's doing because he's desperate to hold on to power. And that's what he is. Desperate to hold on to power, and so is his party, and so are the media. They hate this country. And they try and project upon us the nomenclature of radicals and extremists and dangerous and anti-democratic, which defines them. It says here how non-citizens are getting voter registration forms across the U.S. and how Republicans are trying to stop it. I know you've heard about this today because I distributed it all over the place to friends, to acquaintances, in every media, almost every walk of life. Josh Christensen wrote the piece. Welfare offices and other agencies in 49 U.S. states are providing voter registration forms to migrants without requiring proof of citizenship, leading Republicans and conservatives to call for swift federal action to stop the handouts. Now, the problem with that is they control the bureaucracy, they control the regime, they control the Senate. So how are we going to get swift action for them to stop what they've done and what they're doing? Every state but Arizona, which recently passed a law barring the practice on state but not federal forms, gives applicants for either welfare benefits, driver's licenses, or in some cases mail-in ballots, voter registration forms without demanding proof of citizenship. So there it is. When former Attorney General Barr says there was no evidence of fraud, when state and federal judges say there was no evidence of fraud, when the Supreme Court doesn't take up relevant cases, when the media, of course, say there's no evidence of fraud, this is systemic, ubiquitous fraud that is intended to help one party, the Democrat Party, against another party, the Republican Party. There's currently no requirement on federal voting forms to provide proof of U.S. citizenship, though it is illegal to falsely claim one as a citizen or for a non-citizen to cast a ballot in a federal election. It's also illegal to cross the border without following the law, but that doesn't seem to have stopped almost 20 million people over the last 4 years, has it? But millions of migrants with humanitarian parole, refugee, or asylum status are eligible for benefits that would bring them to the offices where voter registration takes place. That's on purpose, as I've explained before. The National Voter Registration Act, NVRA, of 1993, ordered states to register voters at the Department of Motor Vehicles and agencies where Americans apply for public benefits, and those offices are required by federal law to hand over the registration forms along with the application papers. 1993. Who was president? Clinton. I remember, you know who pushed this bill in the Senate? Chris Dodd. Chris Dodd, the motor voter bill. If an applicant attests that they are a U.S. citizen, that is considered valid on its face, and the person is registered to vote. Now, you'll notice the Democrats aren't upset about this. You haven't heard a single Democrat complain about this. You haven't heard a Democrat say, let's join with the Republicans to prevent that. Not one. Because this is a matter of affirmative policy. The House Administration Committee last month approved the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act to require states to receive proof of citizenship when anyone registers to vote by mail at a DMV or a welfare agency office. While Biden and radical progressive Democrats give ISIS and criminals an app to literally schedule their illegal entry, Republicans must fight any chance of illegal voter registration until we can mass deport, says Representative Chip Roy, who introduced the measure, and he told the New York Post. Speaker Johnson, in a statement, said, as President Biden has welcomed millions of illegal aliens through our borders, including sophisticated criminal syndicates and foreign adversaries, it is incumbent upon Congress to implement greater enforcement measures that secure the voter registration process and ensure only American citizens decide the outcome of the American election. So let's look at this. Biden defies a Supreme Court decision and awards billions to those with student loans to buy their votes. Biden issues a secret executive order, secret, to all the departments and agencies to use every tool and instrumentality they have to register voters in the areas where they are demographically beneficial to the Democrat Party. That's still going on. And of course, the border is wide, wide open to achieve two purposes, really three. One, so when quote-unquote people are counted, the Democrats have more House seats than the Republicans under the census. Not citizens counted, people counted. Pretty swift, huh? Number two, obviously, to register as many illegal aliens as possible to vote. That's what this is all about. That's what this is all about. And the word spreads fast among various aliens and so forth. And number 3, to permanently change the makeup of the population, the citizenry. You know, I wrote about that many, many years ago at National Review when I used to contribute pieces there as a contributing editor. Long, long time ago. I've been looking for the piece I wrote. I can't find it. And, of course, I came under attack by the Wall Street Journal editorial page. They called me a restrictionist. I said, yes, I am a restrictionist. That's what law and order is all about. Restricting anarchy and chaos and lawlessness. While at the time they were pushing a 5-word amendment to the Constitution, thou shalt have open borders. They never admit that, but you can Google that. It's right there. It's right there. It is undeniable that the current structure makes it possible for illegal immigrants and non-citizens to vote, and the American people have no way of knowing how widespread the problem may be, said Ryan Walker, Executive Vice President at the Heritage Foundation sister group, Heritage Action. The SAVE Act puts all these issues to rest and gives Americans confidence that our elections are decided on a more even playing field. But then they claim that you're against people voting. You're suppressing the vote. You're repressing the vote. That you must be Jim Crow 2.0. Comes out of the mouth of Jim Crow 1.0, Joe Biden. But the fact is, when illegal aliens vote, it destroys the voting system, our franchise, and it cancels out the vote of everybody else. See, the trick is to institutionalize the corruption and the fraud, which is what the Democrats have done, which is why their lawyers are spread out throughout the country litigating in favor of no voter ID, no voter ID. The left-leaning Campaign Legal Center has opposed the SAVE Act as a shameful measure that will undermine trust in the electoral process, dismissing concerns over non-citizen voting, declaring it as not taken place at any meaningful level. Of course it's taken place at a meaningful level. How could it not? See, this is the deal. They want us to prove a negative. We're not in charge of this system. If you can register to vote without voter ID, how the hell are we going to ever find you? And how is a citizen going to find? How is a litigant going to find out? There's no fraud. How did you find fraud? Well, I don't know. How did Biden get 80 million votes? It's a fabrication being peddled for personal political gain by leaders who should know better, said Campaign Legal Center Executive Director Adiv Nodi in a statement as the House administration can be prepared to consider the SAVE Act. But federal prosecutions, state investigations, and audits have shown in recent years that thousands of non-citizens are being registered. Ooh, there is proof. And you know what? It's the tip of the iceberg. It's the tip of the iceberg. When the door is wide open and people are flocking in, you're not going to catch them all. As a matter of fact, you're going to catch a small fraction. In Georgia, one of several battleground states that delivered Biden his victory in 2020 election, left-wing voter groups sued Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger earlier this year for trying to implement citizenship verification methods. See, it's only Democrats on the left who do this. Hundreds of non-Americans have since been caught after casting ballots in races ranging from the local presidential and subsequently purged from voter rolls. That's the other thing. Landmark Legal Foundation, among others, is challenging states to purge their rolls, which they're required to do under federal law. In blue states, they refuse to do it.
Mark Levin.
Making your weekend even better. This is the best of Mark Levin.
You know, America, there have been many, many books written, and I've read a whole lot of them, about individuals who have survived totalitarianism. We've talked about this before. Whether it's the Soviet Union, whether it's the Third Reich, whether it's North Korea, whether it's Cuba. And they all say pretty much the same thing. And that is that the people are disbelieving of what's taking place. Disbelieving, acquiescing, or even ignoring what's swirling around them. And as the country continues to change faster and faster, they wonder what happened. As a matter of fact, many of these people have cast votes where votes were permitted for the very tyranny that imprisons them, impoverishes them, and destroys them. Disbelieving what's taking place. There's many methodologies that are used by people who are power hungry. Power hungry. One of them is to change the language. That's occurring. One of them is to change the belief and value system. That's occurring. One of them is to destroy the moorings, the connection between the nation's history and the individual, the nation's family, the individual family and the person. And then, of course, to inundate the population with big lies, small lies, lies of all kinds, and just keep repeating them, brainwashing them. And, of course, intimidation. Intimidation. In other words, people are intimidated from having a different view, an independent view, from challenging that which is taking place, and so forth and so on. That's exactly what's taking place in our country. And it's happening at breakneck speed. Look at every aspect of this culture, whether it's education, whether it's law enforcement, the military, entertainment, the press, immigration again. And the big lie and the repetition of the big lie is crucial. And Joe Biden is superb at it. He's expert at it. You see, you don't have to be intelligent. You can have a thuggish mentality. You can have a low IQ to tell lies and to tell them often. Then, of course, as Lenin understood, as Alinsky understood, as Obama and Hillary Clinton, students of Alinsky, understood, and as Biden learned, you have to destroy, smear, character assassinate your opponents. If you can get away with it, imprison them. Use the system, pervert the system, bastardize the system, and then praise the justice system and law and order and the jury system as you abuse it to destroy your opposition. Virtually every aspect of this totalitarian mindset is being instituted as I speak. Joe Biden doesn't have the power to wave a magic wand and give 500,000 people effectively amnesty and a fast track to citizenship. There's no federal law that provides for that. That's Congress's power. We have separation of powers. Joe Biden doesn't have the authority to give student forgiveness on their loans under the Constitution. That's Congress's power. And the Supreme Court said so, and he defies the Supreme Court while he's attacking the Supreme Court. Joe Biden has used the instrumentalities of the massive bureaucracy to his political ends, which violates federal law. But he controls who's prosecuted under federal law through his malleable attorney general, who's been held in contempt. And, of course, the attorney general's not going to prosecute himself, is he? And who urged Joe Biden to assert executive privilege to protect Joe Biden from even audio being released that would humiliate him and demonstrate that he is, in fact, an imbecile, with his interview with her. This poison, this cancer, is now running through the veins of the government and spilling into the society generally. And like all, even beginnings of totalitarianism, but even advanced totalitarianism, they have their cheerleaders in entertainment. They have their propagandists in the media. And then, of course, you must destroy the electoral system while insisting you're protecting it. You must destroy the electoral system to ensure that you cannot lose the election. You see, the purpose of an election is to get enough like-minded totalitarians in office so that you can impose your will through all branches of government as quickly as possible, making it impossible to undo it. They're power hungry. They want to create a party monopoly. Bernie Sanders is a Marxist. He understands Marx. He understands Trotsky, Lenin, Mao, Gramsci, all of it. It's always totalitarianism in the name of the people. To choose your enemies. To pick at people's emotions and jealousies. It can be race, and it is. It can be classes of wealth, as Marx spoke of, and it is. Corporations versus the individual. Foreigners versus citizens. They're not interested in harmony and unity. Joe Biden said he was, but then again, Joe Biden is a totalitarian. That's what he is. The Democrat Party has been conquered once and for all. Conquered once and for all. It has never been really an American party. It's always been a party, not since its earliest days, but shortly thereafter, a party that has been sort of foreign to the American experiment. It's rejected the Declaration. It's rejected the Constitution in that it fought a civil war. It wasn't just the South versus the North. It was the Democrat Party versus the Republican Party. Same with segregation. Same with Jim Crow. And now same with Marxism and Islamism. They embrace all the isms except Americanism. They reject America from the perspective of the white supremacist and the Klan, from the perspective of the eugenicist, the segregationist, and now they reject America like the Islamists and the Marxists. They never expand liberty. They never expand opportunity. They expand government. Their idea of liberty is bigger, stronger, iron-fisted, centralized government. But that's not liberty. Because you can't control it. The public can't reach it through elections. And you can see how more distant the government is from the people, we the people. Since when does a president wave a magic wand and all of a sudden 500,000 people are on the path, give amnesty and on the pathway to citizenship? No president has done that. He waved the magic wand and all of a sudden people here illegally under DACA are eligible for Obamacare. You and I are paying for insurance for illegal aliens who are here. He waves a magic wand and destroys with 94 executive orders our extensive immigration system. And then comes the propaganda, the big lie. The big lie. Every totalitarian regime, under cover of every ideology, whether it's Marxism or fascism, makes full use of the big lie. The border's open because of the Republicans and Trump. There's more crime in the streets because of the Republicans and Trump not voting for more spending when they're arguing for defunding. The economy is better than it ever was. I inherited an economy that had 9% inflation. It's a flat-out lie. Everybody knows it. It was 1.4%. But you repeat it, and you repeat it, and you repeat it, because perceptions matter. Because perceptions matter. In Biden's case, you have a long and deep history of racism and segregationism, publicly so, in letters and speeches and legislation. But your opponent is the racist and the segregationist. You're the great civil rights activist. And so he lies constantly, endlessly, about a record he never had, and to cover a record he always had. You talk about improving schools while you prevent little kids, especially little poor kids, and especially little black kids, from benefiting from school choice. You warn people that if you're not reelected and that other guy is elected, we will lose our democracy. He'll start rounding up people and putting them in prison. Based on what? You announced today that 500,000 illegal aliens are suddenly given amnesty and a pathway to citizenship. And it's Donald Trump who is separating kids from their parents and putting them in cages. Flat out lie. In fact, it was Obama who did it. And you need to understand that when adults come across the border with little kids, a determination needs to be made whether those kids are being held for sex slavery, for labor slavery, or just to get over the border. There's not a lot of identification. There's no computer systems to vet to make sure that kid belongs to that adult. And so sometimes they're separated for their own sake. But when you're Joe Biden, you lie about it. He's got a horrendous record on his hand. He's destroyed our economy. He's destroyed a living wage for tens of millions of Americans. Small businesses are shuttering. The price of fuel is through the roof. He's robbed our strategic energy reserve. It's the Joe Biden political reserve. He wants to drain it of the last drop before the election. He's using the federal bureaucracy, the welfare state, to register as many Democrats, legal and illegal, as possible. He's flooding our judiciary with left-wing activists. Joe Biden is a tyrant. He's a totalitarian.
Mark Levin.
You're listening to the best of Mark Levin.
Donald Trump must get elected for the well-being of our children and grandchildren in the future of this country. Can you imagine 4 more years of Biden in this administration, this regime? And if Biden wins, I suspect we'll lose the House and they'll hold the Senate. Can you imagine if they control everything and the courts? There's no way out. The Democrat Party seeks to be a monopoly party. It'll change the voting system for good. It'll pack the courts so thoroughly, it'll take a generation to even attempt to do anything about it. You won't recognize our economic system. Taxes will go through the roof. The various constituencies within the Democrat Party, public sector unions, teacher unions, the bureaucracy, radical left-wing organizations, they will be heavily funded by you. U.S. Attorney's Office and thousands of prosecutors will be targeting those who resist or those who don't go along. I don't mean violently, I mean legitimately. Don't go along. You saw Biden's effort to monitor American citizens. You've seen Biden's effort at attacking our free speech, various social media platforms. They're serious. This is tyrannical. Let me ask you this. Those of you who are old enough, and I don't mean old enough. When's the last time you saw the kind of violence that you saw in 2020? It was in the 60s, right? But soon thereafter, followed by uprising in our colleges and universities by this fusion of Marxists and Islamists, demanding the extermination of Jews, demanding the overthrow of our own country right here in the belly of the United States? When's the last time you saw that? Nazi Germany's when you saw that. Wide open borders. So the United States is really not a united anything anymore. It's a territory with people roaming into the country at will, doing what they will to the citizenry of the United States, to our institutions, as long as they know to vote Democrat. If not illegally, their children who will be born here will become United States citizens, and then you will have chain migration. The country will be lost, utterly and completely. And people, many of whom are illiterate in their own languages, can never be expected to understand a complicated document like the Constitution of the United States, or the philosophies and the principles we discuss about natural law. They'll be irrelevant. They will respond to passion and emotion, and that's Marxism, and that's fascism. Hyperbole, demagoguery, propaganda. The Democrat Party, the monopoly party that's following the path, the methodology of other parties that seek monopoly control. It's not about the country, it's about the party. Joe Biden is the most fascistic, that is, dictatorial president in American history. He and his administration, whomever's running it, doesn't matter. He and his administration are literally looking at the various departments and agencies of the federal government and trying to figure out how to use them to advance their ideology, to advance their policy, to empower their party, and to expand their voter base. It has nothing to do with the well-being of the United States, the well-being of the people of the United States, the citizens, upholding and protecting and securing our justice system, our constitutional system. It has nothing to do with any of that. This is a pure power play. A pure power play. And it is justified, or they attempt to justify it. There is no justification, but they attempt to justify it by creating a boogeyman, by creating a fiction. That Donald Trump is Hitler, that Donald Trump is Stalin, that Donald Trump is Mussolini, that Donald Trump will destroy our institutions, our democracy, that Donald Trump is a racist and a segregationist, that Donald Trump will lock up his opponents. They are everything they accuse Donald Trump of. That's typical of Marxists and fascists throughout human history, in the case of Marxism, throughout the last 200 years. 150, but who's counting? Here's a piece of the New York Times that gets almost no attention because it's in the New York Times. But the New York Times is sort of the Pravda. Pravda, the Communist Party, is the Pravda of American Marxism and the Democrat Party. Just as it was the Pravda for Stalin, just as it was the Pravda for Hitler, just as it was the Pravda for Castro. The New York Times is a sinister, diabolical, evil institution with blood on its hands from one genocidal maniac to the next. That's the truth. The resistance to a new Trump administration has already started. Now, this isn't called an insurrection. This isn't called fascism. No, it's a resistance. An emerging coalition that views Donald J. Trump's agenda as a threat to democracy is laying the groundwork to push back if he wins in November, taking extraordinary preemptive action. So, by saying that Trump is a threat to democracy, the Marxist, fascist Islamists resort to Marxism, fascism, and Islamism. Opponents of Donald Trump are drafting potential lawsuits in case he's elected in November and carries out mass deportation as he has vowed. One group has hired a new auditor to withstand any attempt by a second Trump administration to unleash the IRS against them. Democratic-run state governments are even stockpiling abortion medicine. A sprawling network of Democratic officials, progressive activists, Marxists, watchdog groups, police state groups, and ex-Republicans, sickening, has been taking extraordinary steps to prepare for a potential second Trump presidency, drawn together by the fear that Mr. Trump's return to power will pose a grave threat, not just to their agenda, but to American democracy itself. Here we are in the middle of a man who is literally destroying our constitutional system. And the New York Times will never write that story. Charlie Savage, Reed J. Epstein, Maggie Haberman, and Jonathan Swan, they bring out the four stooges themselves. They'll never write the story about what is already happening to our country. While the Supreme Court on Thursday rejected an attempt to nullify federal approval of the abortion pill, liberals fear abortion. Just like the Democrats and the media were obsessed with eugenics. It's really quite sickening if you think about it. We have more abortions now in this country since Dobbs than we had before Dobbs, but it's not enough. And I read somewhere that 100 and some women in Texas, quote unquote, had to travel out of state to get abortions. Did you see that, Mr. Producer? How many had to travel out of state to get cancer treatment? I mean, I'm sorry, there's an inconvenience? How many women in Texas got abortions? Probably a whole bunch. But this is what they're fanatically obsessed with. Ask yourself why. Ask yourself why. When you look at these centralized police states, whether it's Marxism or fascism, or whether it's the Democrat Party in the early 1900s, they're always trying to, quote-unquote, cull the herd. That's what eugenics was all about. Cull the herd. That's what's going on in China. Culling the herd. That's what goes on in these Islamist states and movements. Cull the herd. Eugenics movement is a real movement. Now, you're not allowed to talk about it because the Democrat Party was behind it, and Hitler saw it. And there was a big Democrat, I wrote about this in American Marxism with all the appropriate endnotes. Real scholarship has been done on this by others. There was a big Democrat attorney who wrote an entire book on it. And Hitler read the book, had it translated into German, and then it was the first official book published by the Nazis. And he pointed to the American administration, the prior Woodrow Wilson administration, that the Americans are way ahead of us on this, and they used eugenics to slaughter the Jews and others. What's with this abortion obsession? I notice we never get reports out of the New York Times about, as a percentage of the population, which ethnic group gets the most abortions. It's the black ethnic group, or the black group. That is the black population. And so they're never going to report about that, because then people are going to want to talk about it and ask about it. It's not so simply a matter of a choice or a woman or something like that at that point. Now it becomes, no, wait a minute. Why is that happening? You're just not allowed to raise it. You're not allowed to go there. I go where I go. And this is a long article from personnel to immigration. All these groups that are sucking at the public trough, eating from the public trough. The ACLU is involved. Other groups are involved. Environmental issues. They got a whole shadow government they're creating. A whole shadow movement that is intended to destroy the administration of Donald Trump should Donald Trump get elected. And of course, they're doing everything humanly possible to prevent that. So this isn't about democracy. This article is about sabotage. It's about insurrection. And of course, the New York Times, their handwriting is all over it because they have blood on their hands, because they've supported revolutions in the past. They have supported genocide in the past. As I said, Stalin, they covered up the Holocaust. They helped install Castro. They have embraced Hamas against Israel. Ask the Israelis. And they hate us. This is not, it's a funny thing. These are corporations. They have a special place in our Bill of Rights. But that doesn't mean they're not corrupt, evil, sinister, fascistic, Marxist, genocidal. There's not another corporation on the face of the earth that could survive what the New York Times has done to peoples all over the world and still be held up as some kind of a model for free speech, a model for the press. No, the New York Times, the opposite. It is a corrupt, evil corporation that has done corrupt and evil things. Now, here's the whole article, the headline, they're bragging. The resistance to a new Trump administration has already started. There are things going on in the shadows. There's things going on under the radar right now that you and I can't even imagine. Because the Marxist, fascist, Islamist mindset, working together, organizing together, they don't follow any rules. The only rules they follow are the ones they make for themselves. Patriotic Americans, they go to work every day. They raise their family. They have a faith. They believe in the country. They try to live moral and happy lives. That's not the way that the Marxist, fascist, Islamist lives. They're angry, they're hateful, they're jealous, and they're violent. They talk about election deniers. What is this? Plotting, Mr. Producer, to prevent a newly elected administration from instituting its policies through all sorts of sabotage and guerrilla tactics. What is that? Is that not an insurrection?
Mark Levin.
The Great One makes your weekend even better. This is the best of Mark Levin.
I told you about these polls. Fox has a poll out. Could be right, could be wrong. It's of likely voters, of likely voters. We're head-to-head. Biden has a 48% lead since the first time in October. Of course, the popular vote doesn't determine who the president is, but there you go. There's another poll. Should we believe it or not? Or do we only believe the good ones? You fight like you're behind. One of the things they have noted is that the number one issue now is democracy. Why? Because Biden pushes it everywhere, that Trump is a danger to democracy. The media push it everywhere. He's paid for ads. Biden has to push it everywhere. And so it's everywhere. And yet it's Biden who's destroying constitutional republicanism. We'll call it democracy just for argument's sake. Biden's the one who defied the Supreme Court that told him he could not forgive student loans. Biden has violated federal immigration laws with his open borders policies. Biden has violated congressional power by granting health care benefits to illegal aliens and granting amnesty to illegal aliens. Biden has used the Justice Department to target his political enemies, including Donald Trump. Biden has violated federal law by withholding funds and ammunition from Israel. And the list goes on. That's why I fight the battle of substance and ideas and lies and policy. And I spend almost no time on polls. Am I the only one who does that, Mr. Producer? I don't know. When I turn on TV, all I see are polls. This pollster says this poll says that. Who cares? Who cares? Now, National Review Online, there's a great piece by the editors. Biden's lawless mass amnesty. Introducing his latest quote-unquote immigration relief policy at the White House yesterday, Biden told the assembled crowd that the changes he was making had been considered by Congress and had passed. Then, correcting himself, he conceded that this wasn't true. Rather, he admitted he was announcing yet another executive order. That Biden chose the 12th anniversary of DACA to promulgate his alterations is fitting. Indeed, all that was missing was a commemorative sign that read, 12 years of ignoring the Constitution. The creation of DACA, you may recall, was marked by President Obama's astonishing insistence that if Congress won't act, I will, quote unquote. Prior to its announcement, Obama had explained frequently that he did not have the power to rewrite immigration law on the fly. I'm not a king, Obama said often. I'm not an emperor. But with a tough re-election fight looming, he forgot all that and did it anyway. Civically, this represented a low moment in American history. That President Biden aspires to celebrate it, let alone to build on it, is damning in the extreme. That Biden chose the 12th anniversary of DACA to promulgate his alterations is fitting. Indeed, all that was missing was a commemorative sign, as we pointed out. Ultimately, that is all that matters. Shortly after Biden's speech, the White House released a fact sheet, quote unquote, which are recorded up front that since his first day in office, Biden has called on Congress to secure our border and address our broken immigration system. Notably missing in the subsequent pages was any explanation of why. Having failed to achieve his preferred legislative changes, Biden believed he had the right to issue the adjustments himself. No laws were cited, no court cases were invoked, no principles of any kind were outlined. President Biden, the document explained, has announced new actions, yes, but that's not the way you run this country. And yet it is. And yet it is. Biden is violating the law left and right, and the fact that he has the upper hand on this is very troubling to me. That means the Republican Party, conservative media, patriot media haven't done enough. Haven't done enough to explain that it is Biden who's the dictator. It is Biden who is fascistic. It is Biden who hates democracy. And you're living it each and every day. You're living it each and every day. I don't know why it is so hard for Republicans, spokesmen, and hosts to speak the truth in a compelling way. It's like abortion. They support infanticide. Just keep saying it because it's true. They want no limits on abortion. The American people do. They want no parental notification when it comes to abortion. The American people do. And the list goes on. Make the case. Or the case will be made for them, and they will make your case too, and lie about it. The issue of democracy, don't let anything get by when it comes to Biden. Everything should be challenged and attacked. Democracy. Biden has a funny way of showing his support of democracy. He defies the Supreme Court. He defies federal immigration law. He defies separation of powers and the power of Congress when it comes to spending. He orders the Justice Department, or at least he uses the Justice Department, to target his political enemies. That would seem bad enough. Trump hasn't done anything. They keep saying if Trump's elected, then this will happen and that will happen. Well, things are happening now. Things are happening right now. So if I'm debating Biden, and of course I'm not, so it's all swell for me to say, but if I'm debating Biden, I do it this way. Under what authority did you have the power to defy the Supreme Court when it came to student loans? Under what authority did you have the power to destroy our immigration laws on our border when it comes to illegal immigration? Under what authority did you have the power to grant illegal aliens health care and grant them amnesty? Under what authority does your administration have the power to try and imprison your political opponent? Where do these authorities come from? They don't come from the Constitution. They don't come from the rule of law. You issue executive orders like you're Joseph Stalin issuing fiats. So I want to know, Joe Biden, let's just take one of them. Let's just take one of them, the immigration laws that you have eviscerated. Under what authority did you have to grant amnesty to 500,000 people last week? Under what authority did you have to grant Obamacare, that is, national health care to illegal aliens last month? Under what authority did you have the power to fly 500,000 illegal aliens into the United States? What authority? Don't you think that's the way to approach this during the debate, Mr. Producer? You say you love democracy. You do not. Under what authority did you defy a Supreme Court decision that said you did not have the power to forgive student loans? Under what authority did you destroy 50 years of immigration law so you could open the border to terrorists and criminals and 20 million aliens? Under what authority did you grant millions of illegal immigrants amnesty and taxpayer-funded health care? I didn't say that before, did I, Mr. President? No, I don't think so. Let me keep writing it, because I'm going to have it for myself here. Just bear with me. Now, what authority did you block weapons to Israel in the middle of a war when Congress authorized those weapons for Israel? Under what authority, as senator, private citizen, and vice president, did you steal classified information and reveal it to a publisher? Are those fair enough, Mr. Producer? I'm running against you in part to save our democracy from you. Right? I think so. That's my thought. And put it in the form of a question, because I think that will befuddle a man who's easily befuddled. But that's an issue that must be taken on. You know? You agree with that? I think it must be taken on, especially if it's now the top issue or one of the top issues. And the Democrats are going to make it a top issue whether we like it or not. Well, that's the way you have to deal with this stuff, as far as I'm concerned. Now, more. Let's see here. For example, Fox News. Risk of terror attack on U.S. soil rises to alarmingly high level, experts warn. Now, we're being warned this about every day now. Michael Dorgan, the threat of a major terror event taking place on U.S. soil is at a dangerously high level, with big cities like New York and Washington most vulnerable to an attack. Terror experts are warning. Who's responsible for that? It's been nearly 23 years since nearly 3,000 people perished on 9/11, but even though surveillance and airport security has been beefed up, the world has changed considerably since then. Excuse me. Technology has become cheaper and more advanced. The internet is lightning fast, and America's open border means millions of unvetted people from all over the world are now living among the general population and continue to pour in at record rates. We're in a period where a number of factors are combining to make a terrorist attack on the homeland far more likely than it perhaps had been, says Paul Morrow. By the way, I love this guy. He's on Fox. I don't know him. I've never met him. I've never talked to him. He is top shelf. Paul Morrow, a retired NYPD inspector, he's also a lawyer, who worked in counterterrorism for nearly 15 years. Morrow said the risk of a potential new attack should be assessed in a criminal context. Who has the means, motive, and opportunity to successfully execute a deadly plot? You know what? God willing, if Trump's president, this guy should be the FBI director. What do you think of that, Mr. Producer? The world has gotten a lot smaller since 9/11. You've got drones. The interconnectivity of the internet is more ubiquitous in the areas that maybe didn't have the connectivity. Excuse me. You can get an uplink using something like an Elon Musk satellite, and you can get online from the mountains of the Hindu Kush, where the hell that is. You've got AI capabilities and so forth. And Morrow said the threats would likely emanate from current hotspots around the globe. He's 100% right. The Middle East, where Iran is a live threat. An Iranian major who was taken out by Trump, Soleimani. They might be looking to even a score. It's just a lot. He said we've let 10 to 20 million illegals into the country with little or no vetting. It's canard to think they're all just from small towns in Mexico or Bolivia or Ecuador or something like that. Former CIA Deputy Director Michael Morrell also sounded off in a recent Foreign Affairs op-ed, writing that the terror threat posed by vulnerabilities at the U.S.-Mexico border is blinking red. Isn't this one of the guys, one of the 51 who signed that letter? Could be. I just don't recall. FBI Director Christopher Wray and U.S. Central Command General Michael Kurilla said there are serious threats posed by terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, also known as the Islamic State and Islamic State K, ISIS-K. And forces under Kurilla's command have been battling ISIS targets in Iraq and Syria, killing or capturing almost 1,000 terror fighters. Last year, nearly 500 ground operations and 45 airstrikes, according to Foreign Affairs. Look at that. The Islamo-Nazis are fighting each other. Who would have thought? Kurilla, in March 2023, testified to the Senate Armed Services Committee, called particular attention to ISIS-K and warned that the group would be able to carry out an operation against U.S. or Western... Anyway, you get the drift. You get the drift. And he's running around as Joe Biden talking about democracy. Talking about democracy. I have another one, Mr. Producer. Under what authority did you remember the social sites? Under what authority did you monitor, right? Did you monitor our social sites? I'm writing it down, as you can hear. And what would you say? He threatened them? Yeah, good point. And censor information that you disagreed with from the public. I think that's a good point. How about this? Under what authority did you and your Justice Department decide to threaten and monitor parents? Threaten and monitor parents who challenge school boards. The list goes on and on, folks. The problem would be for Donald Trump, you can't memorize these things. You can't bring notes with you. But Joe Biden, I don't know, Joe Biden has never supported our constitutional system, ever. Ever. In fact, I have a better idea, Mr. Producer, in addition to this. Since when was supporting democracy opposing public school integration?
Mark Levin.
We're giving you nothing but the best of Mark Levin.
This is from the Washington Free Beacon. This is part of it, but there's more to discuss. You've seen this big brouhaha because Benjamin Netanyahu put out this video that's 45 seconds long, and he basically said in a very, very polite, almost passive way, he said, look, thank you for everything you're doing, Mr. Biden and Mr. Blinken, but we have arms and ammunition in the pipeline that we can't seem to get as we're trying to finish off Hamas, and we're about to go to war with Hezbollah. What's that all about? You told us you would look into it, and we just want to make sure we get it. So they went to their favorite propagandist, who's actually an Israeli that stabs his own government in the back, Mark Levin, at Axios, which is a left-wing site. And they go to their favorite brothers and sisters at Politico and the Washington Post, and then it takes off all over the place, and Netanyahu comes under attack. And Netanyahu said today, look, I'll take all the personal attacks as long as we can get what we need and defend our country. And what did he do that was so offensive? Well, he revealed that the Biden administration is slow-walking ammunition and weapons. Now, they're not slow-walking it to Iran. All kinds of billions of dollars have gone to Iran, and they're busy buying weapons and manufacturing weapons, and they're an eye blink away from having nuclear weapons, and we have funded all this. You and me. And in fact, Biden funded October 7th. That's right. And I'll say it forever. But here's a piece from Adam Credo over at the Free Beacon. The Biden administration stopped fast-tracking weapons to Israel in early January after a pressure campaign from Democrat lawmakers who oppose American support for Israel's war to eradicate Hamas. A Republican senator said today, federal law allows the president to forego formal congressional notifications on arms sales when emergencies exist. And the Biden administration invoked this power last year as it worked to quickly provide Israel with the arms it needed to combat Hamas. But the administration stopped acknowledging the emergency in Israel after receiving a letter from nearly 20 congressional Democrats in January urging it to end expedited weapons sales to Israel, said Senator Tom Cotton. This man's a great patriot, Tom Cotton. He wrote in a Thursday letter pressing the White House to explain the delay in arms shipment to Israel. Now, the big issue here is how Biden and Blinken know the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy works with them, know how to use the bureaucracy. And after Netanyahu released that really harmless video to tell the whole world what was going on, they trashed him. They said, we don't know what he's talking about. We don't know what he's talking about. We're not stopping anything. They're lying to us. Cotton wrote, your administration is engaged in bureaucratic sleight of hand to withhold this crucial aid to Israel during a shooting war. According to a letter that he wrote, you're playing politics with the nation's honor and our allies' security. Worse still, your administration lacks the honesty to communicate its true policy to the American people. That's what's key, instead preferring to hide behind weasel words and bureaucratic process. The letter comes just days after Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu publicly accused Biden of withholding U.S. weapons and ammunition that the Jewish state is relying on to eradicate Hamas in the Gaza Strip and combat a growing threat from Hezbollah on its northern border. The White House denied the accounts, saying it doesn't know what Netanyahu is talking about, but said it had delayed shipments of 2,000-pound and 500-pound bombs. Cotton, a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, says the administration is being dishonest about the delay, that it has not sent an assortment of promised weapons, prolonging Israel's war and endangering its soldiers at a time when both Hamas and Hezbollah continue to rearm, regroup, and coordinate attacks on Israeli civilians. Can you imagine this? Now, the enemy knows this is going on. The Democrats know. The Defense Department knows. The federal military contractors know. Everybody knows but you and me. But now we do, thanks to Tom Cotton. What I want to get into after the break is this bureaucratic morass that you have to go through to get arms to a friendly ally. But the way that you cut through it is the President of the United States calls it an emergency, and they cut through all the red tape, and they get the ammunition and the weaponry to where it needs to go. Well, Biden put his foot on the brake. And so when they say, we don't know what he's talking about, they know exactly what he's talking about. The Arms Export Control Act requires the administration to notify Congress before sending weapons to a foreign country, Cotton said. Your administration has manipulated this requirement by withholding this formal notification to Congress of approved weapons sales, including F-15s, tactical vehicles, 120-millimeter mortars, 120-millimeter tank rounds, joint direct attack munitions, and small-diameter bombs. Your administration can then claim that the weapons are in process while you never deliver them. You got that? But they can't get them to Ukraine fast enough. This bureaucratic delay tactic has allowed the Biden administration to deny accusations of withholding arms to Israel, while also placating the far-left flank of the Democrat Party that is pressing the president to punish Israel based on false charges of genocide, according to Cotton. Now, this is why they have a guy like Barak Rabin. This guy's an Israeli. He used to, or still does, write for Israeli papers, but he's hired by Axios. And the Biden regime, Blinken in particular, Sullivan and the others, they go directly to him because he will transcribe what they say and he will run with it. He hates Netanyahu and he hates the government in Israel. He's a horrendous backstabbing mouthpiece for the Biden administration, in my humble opinion. And so he puts out this story in Axios under breaking or a scoop, and then all the other media run with it. But, of course, he doesn't explain what's actually taking place, the truth of what's taking place. After Netanyahu's accusations this week, the United States reportedly released one ship carrying an arms supply. But Cotton said this modest step doesn't cure the damage done by the delay. He said any delays to military support to Israel blatantly disregard Congress's bipartisan mandate to supply Israel with all it needs to defeat Hamas terrorists and other Iranian-backed groups. Our ally is under sustained threat, and we must use all available resources to expedite military aid. The senator is asking the White House to come clean about the status of U.S. arms shipments to Israel and to detail what has been paused in recent months amid a pressure campaign from anti-Israel activists and Democratic lawmakers in Congress. This is Biden listening to Bernie Sanders, Tlaib, AOC, Omar, the Hamas wing of the Democrat Party. He's choking off Israel while he provided over $100 billion to Iran, and while Qatar and other countries are pouring money into Hamas and Hezbollah. And they trash and attack Netanyahu. They try and set him up like, well, I don't know what he's talking about. And then like it's a dirty trick or it's a dirty play. So we're going to postpone our meeting over what? Over the Iran nuclear progress. What? This is the same propaganda operation that Donald Trump has to deal with, that Sam Alito has to deal with, that Clarence Thomas has to deal with, that the Speaker of the House has to deal with. It's the same thing. Cotton asked the White House to explain by July 1 what weapons and ammunition are being withheld from Israel, including any weapons or ammunition delayed more than 2 weeks beyond their original delivery date. This is to include a detailed list of all foreign military and direct commercial arms sales requested by Israel and the current status of each request. Cotton also wants to know about any weapons or ammunition Israel has requested to be expedited, the status of each request, and an explanation for the status. The senator says that if Congress must intervene to fast-track any outstanding weapons, it will do so. White House envoy Amos Hochstein reportedly chastised Netanyahu earlier this week for going public about the arms situation, saying the Israeli leader's comments were unproductive and, more importantly, completely untrue, according to CNN. Well, that's CNN, propaganda operation for the government. It's untrue. Well, then give Tom Cotton the information he's requesting, and we'll see if it's untrue. It's not untrue. The Israelis know what's been ordered, and they know if they've gotten it or not. And this is Joe Biden buckling to the Islamists in his party, as he's buckled to the Islamists in his party in the streets. Now, I've told you this man is an anti-Semite. I've told you this man, his administration is filled with anti-Semites, just like Franklin Roosevelt and his administration. They talk a good game. They fool a lot of Jews, but they are what they are. But I want you, all Americans, to know that it's Biden and Blinken and Pierre whatever and all the rest of them who are lying to you, the American people, and you can expect more of it during the debate. They are lying to you. They are slow-walking this stuff if they ever deliver it at all. We don't know what he's talking about. They know everything that's being done. It's like the letter from the 51 spooks. That is, former intel types. The Biden campaign drafted the letter, got the signatures, handed it to the media. It comes up in the second debate. He denies it, says it's Russian disinformation, points to the letter, points to the fact that over 50 former intelligence and national security officials, including 4 or 5 former CIA directors, he said, of both parties, said it's Russian disinformation. When they planted it, and they knew it wasn't Russian disinformation. They're doing the same thing to Netanyahu and the state of Israel and the people of Israel. Same damn thing. And this Tom Cotton, he really is a prince. He's a gem. He's on that committee. He knows exactly what's going on.